my family said I was. A waste of space. And laughed when I moved into my car. You'll be back begging, they said. I just smiled. A month later, I showed up in a limo and they stood in the doorway as I packed up the last of my things into the trunk of my Honda Civic. Not a word of encouragement, not even a good luck. Just folded arms and smirks. My brother Scott muttered, Bet you're back by the end of the week. My mother laughed without looking up from her phone. Back begging. Just wait. I didn't say anything. Just smiled. It wasn't a smug smile, either, it was quiet. The kind you wear when you've made peace with pain. The kind you learn from years of being told you're a burden. A waste of space. A placeholder in your own family. Truth is, that smile had been forming for years. I had stayed too long. I think I knew that. I was the oldest, but treated like the leftover. I wasn't the golden child with scholarships like Natalie, or the baby with charm like Scott. I was the one who paid the Wi-Fi bill, drove mom to her appointments, fixed the leaky sink, and stayed silent when they forgot my birthday. Again. I was the man of the house when it was convenient for them, and a freeloader when it wasn't. The breaking point didn't come from some huge fight. It came over spaghetti. Mom said something snide about me freeloading while the real world passed me by. Scott laughed with his mouth full. I looked down at my plate, then looked up at all of them. Something shifted. I stood up, walked to my room, and began packing. 15 minutes later, I was at the door. You have no plan, my dad had said, standing in front of the television. You think you can just move into your car and make it? Out there? You'll come crawling back. Mom added, not even glancing up. Don't expect us to rescue you when you do. Maybe they expected me to argue. Beg. Cry. But instead I just looked at them one last time, smiled, and said, I won't. And then I shut the door behind me. The sun was setting as I backed out of the driveway for the last time. The street looked different, quieter. Maybe it always had. Maybe I had just never seen it from the driver's seat, finally leaving instead of returning. I didn't have much: a duffel bag of clothes, my laptop, a stack of notebooks filled with half-finished business ideas, and a determination so sharp it hurt to carry. I had no apartment, no savings, and no backup plan. Just one car. And a vow to never need them again. The first night was the worst. I parked behind a 24-hour gym on the edge of town, where the lights weren't too bright and the noise wasn't too loud. I cracked the window just enough to let air in, pulled my hoodie over my head, and tried to sleep with the stick shift digging into my ribs. It was 39 degrees. The cold crept into my bones like it belonged there, as if it had been waiting. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared at the ceiling of the car, listening to the distant hum of passing cars and the occasional rustle of someone else out there, wandering, surviving. I was hungry. Not starving, just hollow. Like the hunger was less about food and more about everything I had been denied: dignity, peace, respect. I had 2 granola bars in my glove box and a crumpled $5 bill in my wallet. I didn't touch either. Morning came slow, and my back ached from the contortions I'd slept in. I brushed my teeth in the gas station bathroom and stared at my reflection. My face looked the same. But my eyes, they were different. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt alive in a way I never had before. I spent the day in a corner of the public library, stealing Wi-Fi, scribbling plans in my notebook. Everything I had ever written before felt like theory. Now it was war. I wrote down ideas, freelance gigs, flipping used electronics, niche blog content strategies, crypto experiments, anything. I didn't have a comfort zone anymore, so I had no excuses. By day 3, I had my first freelance gig lined up, editing product descriptions for an e-commerce site. It paid $20. I treated it like 1,000. I'd sit in my car after hours, parked behind a diner with free internet, tapping on my laptop until my fingers cramped. I watched YouTube tutorials on affiliate marketing at 2 a.m. I made $2.50 on a product click one night and nearly cried. A week later, I was flipping used audio gear from pawn shops. Found a vintage mixer for $60, cleaned it up, sold it for $200. That money bought me a hotspot and a better seat at the 24-hour cafe where no one asked questions if you nursed a coffee long enough. Day by day, the momentum grew. One night, as I sipped dollar store soup with a plastic spoon, I got a ping. A client I cold emailed had responded. They wanted to hire me, for a retainer gig. $600 for the month. Not much, but to me? It was my lifeline. I stared at the screen for so long the screen dimmed. Then I leaned back and smiled. It wasn't enough to survive. But it was proof. Proof I could build something. That week, I bought a used button-down shirt from a thrift store and walked into a co-working space with a free trial pass. I networked like my life depended on it, because it did. I talked to strangers, pitched myself, asked questions. A guy named Leo gave me a tip on a platform where content was blowing up, short-form finance videos. That night, in my car, I filmed my first clip under the flickering parking lot light, talking about how I'd turned $60 into $200 with a single flip. I uploaded it half asleep. And forgot about it. Until the next morning. The views were climbing. Something was changing. Something was happening. I didn't sleep that night, not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. I kept refreshing the video. 8,000 views. Then 14,000. By sunrise, it had crossed 32,000. My face was greasy, my eyes bloodshot, and I was wearing the same hoodie I'd slept in for over a week. But strangers were in the comments saying things like, "This is inspiring, man," and "Do more of these." And I remember sitting there, in that dusty Civic with the broken AC and a cracked windshield, feeling more seen than I ever had in my life. By noon, the video had passed 100K views. A brand DM'd me asking if I'd consider a sponsorship for their budgeting app. Me, a guy living in his car, eating peanut butter from a spoon, was getting ad deals. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, I kept posting. I made 2 more videos that week, both from the back seat of my car. No flashy production. Just stories. Real ones. About flipping, budgeting, mindset, failure. I talked like I had nothing to lose, because I didn't. And the people watching? They could tell. 3 days later, a popular content creator stitched one of my videos and called me the underdog with no excuses. That's when the floodgates opened. Followers exploded. My PayPal lit up with tips. People started reaching out with opportunities, podcasts, collaborations, mentorship offers. But one message stood out. A small finance newsletter wanted to feature me. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam. But something told me to open it. They asked for a quick interview, said they were inspired by my story. I agreed, thinking it'd be a one and done. Harmless. That feature went viral. Suddenly, I was no longer just some guy making videos in his car. I was the guy who turned rock bottom into rocket fuel. That's what the article called me. I was still showering at the gym and eating instant noodles in parking lots, but now people were paying attention. Then came the turning point. I got an email from a startup that made tools for side hustlers. They wanted me to create a content series for their platform. 5 videos, $5,000. All up front. I reread the email 5 times. I thought it was a scam. It wasn't. I didn't even blink. I said yes. When that money hit my account, I sat there staring at the numbers like they were written in a different language. I went straight to the nearest suit shop, cheap, but clean. Bought one off the rack, had it tailored. Then I rented a limo. Not a car service. Not a nice Uber. A full-on, stretched black limo. And I made the call. "Hey, Scott," I said. "You guys still doing Sunday dinners?" "Yeah," he said, confused. "Why?" I smiled into the receiver. "I'll be there." Sunday came faster than I expected. I had the limo driver circle the block 3 times before pulling up to my parents' house. I wanted to make sure they were all there. I knew the routine. Dinner started at 6. By 5:45, the cars were already in the driveway: Mom's minivan, Dad's truck, Natalie's shiny SUV, and Scott's ever-reliable beat-up sedan. I checked my reflection one last time. The suit fit perfectly now, midnight navy with sharp lapels, crisp white shirt, charcoal tie. The kind of look that made people do a double take. Not flashy. Just unmistakably put together. Then the driver opened the door, and I stepped out into the golden light of a late Sunday afternoon. Their street hadn't changed, still the same cracked sidewalks and overgrown hedges, but everything felt different. For once, I wasn't dragging my feet toward that front porch. I wasn't shrinking myself or bracing for backhanded comments. This time, I walked tall. I didn't knock. I opened the door and walked right in like I used to, except this time, I wasn't the one being tolerated. I was the one being watched. Silence fell over the dining room like a dropped glass. My mother was standing by the sink, drying her hands. She froze, towel halfway to the counter. My father was mid-sentence, beer in hand, jaw slack. Scott turned so fast his fork clattered against his plate. And Natalie? She dropped her phone. No one spoke. For 5 long seconds, the only sound was the quiet hum of the oven and the ticking clock on the wall. "Hey," I said casually. "Smells good." Mom blinked like she'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd come by." "It's Sunday, right?" Scott scoffed. "You rent a limo to prove something?" I smiled. "No. Just felt like arriving properly." I could feel the heat radiating off my father, his arms crossed, lips tightening the way they always did when he felt small. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the man in front of him. And maybe he didn't. Because this wasn't the version of me they'd kicked out. This wasn't the waste of space they used to laugh at. This man had survived the cold, eaten humble pie in parking lots, turned Wi-Fi theft into a business model, and found clarity in hunger. I pulled an envelope from my inside jacket pocket and handed it to Mom. She hesitated. "What's this?" I nodded toward it. "Rent repayment. Every cent I ever cost you. Plus interest." She opened it. Her eyes widened. My father's mouth opened slightly, then closed again like he was chewing on regret. But I wasn't done. I turned to Natalie. "I remember you said I'd always be behind. Thought you might like to know my content's being syndicated now. Sponsors, brand deals, all that. I hit 6 figures last week." Her face paled. Then I turned to Scott, the one who always smirked the most, the one who called me weak every time I chose kindness over confrontation. "Still working at the tire shop?" I asked, tilting my head. He didn't answer. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out 3 envelopes. "These are for the people who were decent to me when I had nothing," I said. "And Marie. Uncle Ron. And Mrs. Fletcher down the street. They checked in. They didn't laugh." Mom stepped forward. "Why are you doing this?" I looked around that room, the same room I had once tiptoed through, trying not to be a burden. The room where I had been small, silent, careful. I straightened my tie and said, "Because I want you to understand something. I didn't need to be rescued. I needed to be left alone long enough to become who I was meant to be." And then I turned to leave. But not before adding, "Dinner smells great. Hope you enjoy it." I stepped back into the limo. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. And as the driver pulled away, I didn't look back. As the limo eased down the street, I leaned back against the seat and finally let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Not from nerves. From release. It was the silence that struck me most. No shouting. No guilt. No one asking for more. Just quiet. Just me. I looked out the tinted window as the house faded behind me. Same porch, same chipped paint, but it felt small now. Like something I'd outgrown long ago and only now realized. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. For years I'd begged them, silently, sometimes aloud, to just see me. Respect me. Believe in me. But they never had. So I stopped asking. And I built something instead. Now, they could see it. Whether they liked it or not. And the best part? I hadn't shown up to prove them wrong. I'd shown up to prove me right. By the time I got back to my apartment, the new one, with sunlight and space and a key that was mine, my phone had 6 missed calls. 3 from Mom. 1 from Natalie. 2 from Dad. I didn't listen to them right away. I made tea. Took off the suit. Sat by the window. Then, curiosity won. First message, Mom, voice trembling. You didn't have to embarrass us like that. Second, Scott. Short. You think money makes you better than us? Third, Natalie, whispering like someone might hear. Congrats. I guess. But the last one? From Dad. You made your point, he said. But don't forget who raised you. I stared at the phone. And smiled. Because the truth? They didn't raise me. Rock bottom did. 2 days later, I drove, not in a limo this time, just my car, now cleaned and quiet, to a little house on the edge of town. Aunt Marie answered the door in her gardening gloves. Oh my lord, she whispered, eyes welling up. Is that really you? I hugged her. Yeah. I wanted to say thank you. She tried to wave it off, but I pressed the envelope into her hand. You were the only one who asked how I was doing. Even when you couldn't do much, you still cared. She opened the envelope and gasped. I can't take this, she said. You can't, I replied gently. And you will. I did the same for Uncle Ron and Mrs. Fletcher. Quiet people who showed me quiet kindness when I had nothing. No big speeches. No cameras. Just real gratitude, sealed with a handshake or a hug. It felt better than the limo. Better than the applause. Because they had believed in me when there was nothing to believe in yet. By the end of that week, the messages from my family had shifted. The guilt had dried up. The blame had cooled. Now came the new tone, measured, careful, even complimentary. Natalie sent a message. Hey, I've been thinking about your content. Would love to pick your brains sometime. Maybe we could do something together? Scott texted. Heard you're doing well. I've got some ideas too, maybe we could talk business? And from Mom, a classic. Families have their rough patches. But blood is blood, right? Come over for dinner this Sunday. Let's start fresh. The audacity was almost impressive. I sat with those messages for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to be precise. I wrote back one by one. To Natalie. Appreciate the interest. But I'm building with people who believed in me before the numbers showed up. Wish you the best, though. To Scott. I'm good, man. Hope you find your own thing, too. To my mom, I was gentler, but still clear. I forgive you. But I'm not coming back. Not for dinner. Not for anything. This new chapter? I'm writing it without the old characters. Because here's what I had realized. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table just because they watched you starve. They had chosen who I was when I had nothing. Now I had chosen who I'd be with everything. And they weren't part of that picture anymore. The next month moved like a dream, but not the kind you float through. The kind you fight for. I got an office, small, one window, second floor of a converted warehouse downtown. It smelled like old books and ambition. I set up a desk, my laptop, a ring light, and a whiteboard that quickly filled with notes, numbers, and phrases that had once just been scribbles in a car-bound notebook. The followers kept coming. The brand deals got bigger. I was invited to speak on a podcast, then 3 more. Someone made a reaction video to my story and it went viral. I woke up one morning to find my face on the front page of a business subreddit titled, "This man lived in his car a month ago. Now look at him." But all of that? It wasn't the real win. The real win was waking up and realizing I didn't dread the day ahead. The real win was going to the grocery store and buying real food, not because I had to stretch $1, but because I could choose. I furnished my new apartment with care. Not luxury, intention. Every chair, every frame, every lamp had meaning. I lit candles. Played music. Read books I hadn't had the energy to open in years. And sometimes, late at night, I'd lie on the floor and stare at the ceiling. Not in pain. Not in hunger. But in awe. Because I remembered what it was like to count pennies. I remembered what it was like to pray your car battery would hold another night. I remembered what it was like to sit outside a cafe at midnight, stealing Wi-Fi just to keep your dreams alive. And now? Now I was here. Living proof that you can be discarded by the people who were supposed to love you most, and still rise. Still rebuild. Still become. But there's something else that comes with this kind of clarity. A new kind of loneliness. Not the kind that makes you feel empty, but the kind that makes you realize just how few people really get it. The grind. The silence. The weight of starting over when everyone's written you off. So I built a space for those people. I launched a small online community, not for fans, not for clout. For fighters. People living in cars. People starting from zero. People who didn't need pity, just possibility. I called it the Backseat Brotherhood. It wasn't huge. But it was real. Every week, we met online. Shared wins. Losses. Strategies. No fluff. No hacks. Just people being real with each other. One guy was sleeping in his van outside a Planet Fitness and had just made his first $50 flipping tools on eBay. A woman in Detroit was doing hair out of her car and building a brand on TikTok. They weren't victims. They were early versions of success stories. And I realized something else. I didn't get out despite rock bottom. I got out because of it. See, failure strips you down. It burns the fluff. All that's left is the truth, and what you're willing to do with it. Some people run from that. Others? We build from it. Last week, I passed by my old street. Not on purpose. I was coming back from a meeting across town, took a wrong turn, and there it was. The house. Same chipping paint. Same lopsided mailbox. For a moment, I pulled over across the street and just sat there. A woman walked by with a stroller and nodded politely. She didn't know that the man in the parked car used to cry himself to sleep behind the wheel just a few blocks from here. That he used to beg silently for someone to see his worth. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need them to say sorry. I didn't need them to change. Because I had. I didn't build this life for revenge. I didn't show up in that limo to rub it in. I showed up because I needed to see it. I needed to see their faces. Not for validation, but for closure. To remind myself that the opinions that used to define me never mattered. They told me I was a waste of space. They told me I'd come back begging. But I didn't beg. I built. And if you're listening to this, sitting in your own version of rock bottom, wondering if you're crazy for believing in yourself, listen carefully. You are not a waste of space. You are not what they say. You are the quiet before the breakthrough. You are the draft before the masterpiece. And one day, you'll walk into a room full of people who once laughed at you. And you won't need to say a word. Because you'll have already won.